All right, everybody. I think we're going to get started here. My co-panelists.
Hello.
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 So thanks for joining us, everybody. We're going to be talking about the intersection of physical real-world assets and crypto as bridged by chips, secure elements. So I'll give a brief introduction by myself. My name is Cameron Robertson. I'm one of the co-founders at ARCS. You may have heard about us called Kong. We made these cash notes. And we basically make small little NFC chips that can be embedded into all sorts of different things. I'll turn it over to Mark.
I'm Mark Shekleton. I'm the CEO and founder of Smart Seal. We're embedding NFC chips into physical assets for proofs of authenticity, ownership, and possession.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Kaida. I'm the founder of Visical. We actually help brands with their marketing strategies or their just general strategies, and part of that is helping them figure out tokenization and how to actually put things on blockchain.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Lee, co-founder of IYK, and we've been experimenting in this digi-physical world since 2021, and excited to talk about it here today.
Awesome. Well, to kick it off, I'm kind of curious to hear how everybody got working at this intersection of crypto and physical. So, let anybody jump in here.
Yeah. I've been my background's in software and hardware engineering. I've been working in that field for over 20 years, and I also have a background in cryptography. And when I saw that the NFC chip adoption was rising and the secure elements were becoming more ubiquitous, it really was a no-brainer to mix the two together. I think it's really an amazing time to be in this field right now, and it's super exciting to see all the really neat things that we can build with this tech. We're just on the forefront of it right now.
So I actually got bit by the bug, as someone said this morning. I was working for a marketing agency in New York, and we were working on a watch account for the second largest luxury conglomerate in the world. And they were like, we want to do something with blockchain. And I had experience working with some of the early Ethereum co-founders. And the CryptoKitties experiment had just happened. So early 2018, the rise of Fortnite and $100 million a month spent on skins. I'm like, let's do a digital version of this watch in AR. Let's add it onto the watch. Let's have it ship with an NFT. So I've been thinking about how to connect the digital and the physical for a while. I'm also an RPG game player, so I really love in-game shit. And so that made a lot of sense to me that people might also value digital assets, but linking them to the physical seemed very important, especially to segue into that.
Yeah, for me, I actually met my co-founder on Discord early in 2021.
Very crypto.
Yeah, we were very into NFTs at the time, and we started to see brands come into the space. So as NFT people, we were super excited to see that, and ultimately we were kind of disappointed in the implementations that we were seeing. So there was this one example, Dolce & Gabbana was dropping this pair of sneakers, and they said it came with an NFT. But when we did some research, the way it was implemented was you'd buy the sneaker in the store, get a code on your receipt that you would then put into a separate form with your ETH address, and they would airdrop you the token. So the reason why that was disappointing to us is the NFT is completely detached from the physical, right? Where it's supposed to be this purchase that comes with these two assets, but when you do it in that way, they're instantly detached, where I can sell the NFT on OpenSea but keep the shoe, or I can sell the shoe on eBay and keep the token, right? So what we really wanted to solve was, how can we have a digital asset that mirrors physical possession? And so we went down this whole rabbit hole of different design models and all of that, and ultimately we landed on what we call the pull model, where anyone who has a verified tap of an item should be able to claim the corresponding token in perpetuity. So that also means if I sell my shoe or if I give it away to someone else, that the next possessor can actually tap to claim. And that ends up creating an on-chain history of a physical item's movement in the real world. And that was kind of the genesis of everything we've done since then.
So this kind of brings up the next question, which is, I'm curious to think about an integration that anybody has worked on or can think about which exemplifies the power of this? Or conversely, you know, Becca, you and I were talking previously about like maybe there's an integration that has been a terrible failure and like things don't work really well. So like curious to jump in. I mean, you know, Becca, you can start here. Something
Yeah.
that work well or
Yeah.
work bad.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything work too well to date, although you just showed me something ahead of this that seems to work reasonably well. But from a brand standpoint, I think that everyone's so concerned with the reliability of some of these technologies, which is why they're a little bit hesitant, even though, again, like the benefits are quite clear from the consumer standpoint and the brand standpoint. But again, it kind of all comes down to a flawless execution and something that they have zero worry about. And I think we're still in the infancy stage, right? Where it's like the things that you're working on or the things that Mark's working on are so early that it's like they need to have like 12 months of that play out and get consumer reactions, right? Because at the end of the day, consumer behavior is going to drive that adoption. And if consumers demand these from their products, they're like, why isn't my shirt coming with an interactive experience or some level of like leveling up my shirt, right? Or having some community engagement to it? That's going to be the huge tipping point. So I think that, you know, it's kind of a non-answer, but I haven't seen anything too well to date executed that's had that been within the zeitgeist enough where people are craving it. But I think it's going to come probably the next 6 months.
I think you're absolutely right that it needs to be flawless. You know, if you're creating something for consumers, most consumers are not NFT collectors. Most consumers don't have MetaMask wallets, so being able to abstract that away, but still have them be able to register the NFT non-custodially. You know, these are actually like very difficult problems, and there are all sorts of different tricks and ways to get around that. You know, it's really just in an experimental phase right now.
I have a question for everyone. If you guys can raise your hand, anyone who owns an NFC chip.
So
Okay, everyone's hand should be up because your badge has one on it. So it's like, I think also we have a bit of a QR code dilemma where people at first were like, what do I do with that? And now everyone knows because of COVID, oh, I scan it with my camera. I think that we're gonna face a little bit of an adoption friction issue until people realize that like, oh, I scanned this because this does something.
Yep, definitely. I think even my grandma can use QR codes now, and I think the same thing will happen for NFC. It's also crazy to think how device support for NFC is so ubiquitous, where most people in this room, you don't even need to install an app. You just need to wake your phone and tap. And that's because NFC's been used for a really long time. It's actually powered a lot of mobile payments for many, many years. And so your Android phone and your Apple phone has like support built in. So really what we're seeing here is the inflection of consumer applications being built on NFC, because payments have been doing this for a long time. I think to go back to Cameron's question, we're seeing two emergent cases of like behavior kind of take off. The first is content. So we did this drop with this artist, Verite. She's an indie musician, and she actually dropped chipped merch through us before her new album came out. And what she did was she wanted to create, and IYKs, we're always trying to create like accessible experiences. So what we designed was, why not just tap to get exclusive content, right? Because the chip actually gives you further segmentation on your consumer base, where today she might be, or yesterday, she might have been reduced to posting content on Instagram, but Instagram is broadcast, right? So through the chip, she was able to drop early access to singles to only her merch owners. And in the music world, people who buy merch are generally like a super fan. So we're seeing content kind of take off, and also the social use cases. So G-Money, he's using our technology, and if you find me after this talk, you can actually tap my shirt to get a PO-op that you met this shirt. And you know, he's still figuring out exactly what he's gonna do with that, but you can think of it as minting your IRL social graph, right? Where everyone today, you're meeting all these people at a conference. These are implicit interactions that occur in the real life. Through the NFC chip, we can actually make it a little more explicit and bring it on chain. And we're also seeing like messaging apps being built on top of NFTs, where now that you minted the POAP for me, I might actually be able to reconnect with you tomorrow. So those are two categories like we're seeing kind of adoption grow.
And something I didn't want to gloss over with like the capabilities. You know, Mark, we were talking the other day about like kind of a little bit of your origin story with your co-founder, like a key one being authenticity. So I'm like curious to see like how you think about that and how that came out. I mean, you can tell the story better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that we really got into this, my co-founder is from Nigeria. He was making prints that were like very African prints that were coming from his hometown. He was importing them to the United States and selling them here. One of the issues, there was a growth of African fashion, and one of the issues that he ran into was that a lot of the things that he was selling against, the consumers didn't know whether this came from China or it came from Africa, and the market was very much diluted with counterfeits and knockoffs, and there is no traceability. So he came to me and said, "Is there any way you can put a microchip inside this or a circuit board that can, give the end user some assurance or some attestation as to where this comes from?" So we thought about it a lot, and we worked on it, tried a bunch of different things. We had, a e-ink QR code that was time synced to a server. We went through a lot of different iterations and ended up finding these secure element chips and really diving in. And this is really what made the magic happen. You combine that with an NFT, you register that contract, and you register the attestations associated with that. And now there's mathematical proof, there's traceability that this product came from this location, and these separate authorities attest to that. And it's not just a sticker on a product, it's a mathematical signature. And I think there's a tremendous amount of power in that, and that's really what got us excited about this.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about the origin stories that we all have getting into this space. Similarly, like we come from a background of making door locks with secure element chips and cryptography in them, and so a lot of NFC chips you see that are off the shelf are literally just pointers. They're like a URL. Anybody can duplicate it. And so when we came and saw this, we said, well, we have the tools of cryptography to solve these problems. Right now we use them for trading monkey JPEGs and, USDC and things, but we can bring that IRL. So I kind of want to dive in actually now, a little bit deeper on the technical side and where we've been thinking about this. We had back in right after Ethereum, the ERC20 standard came out, and it was a standardization for fungible tokens, which led to the ICO boom of 2017, 2018. Then very shortly thereafter, we had the ERC721, the folks who worked on CryptoKitties, and that led to this incredible non-fungible token boom. And now recently, we're starting to see these emergent standards around chips. And obviously, in the name of the panel, we're talking about 5791, which is the PBT. So I want to dive in a little bit further about like, how does everybody think about, will this new standard become the NFT as physicals? What are the problems with it? Is there still something better to come? So.
Oh my God, Mark, please start with your hot take.
Yeah, I know. I'd
We've
like
got some
hot
spicy takes.
Well, I think it's a good start. The 5791 is, what it does, it's a standard for an extension of the 721. But on top of that, it has some requirements for how you make a chip, an NFC chip. The chip has to be able to do an ECDSA signature. And it limits the transferability of the NFT until it can collect a signature from the chip. So what this is intended to do is to prevent the decoupling of the NFT and the chip itself, which would mean that I run away with the shirt and then someone else has the NFT. So what we really want to do is we want to make sure that the NFT represents a certificate of ownership and origination that's linked to that shirt. if you're like adding an image to it and you're like adding something of value, like a piece of art to that NFT, it becomes the certificate of that. So, for this new standard, I think it works really well. One of the things I would add to it would be to add a lost or stolen flag. That's one of the things that we do in our contracts. What this really does is it incentivizes the token to be transferred with the item, because when the owner of the NFT can flag that item as lost or stolen, so when that item is scanned, there's a different behavior on the screen. He says it comes up red. It says this item is lost or stolen. It belongs to this owner, and that's actually, it's like there is no like legal enforcement of digital deeds. There's no legal precedent for this. So the lawyers really don't. The judicial system doesn't really have this in place, but we can enforce it technically, and we can enforce it by incentive. So that's one of the things that I would add to the standard.
That's something that I love. When Mark and I connected a couple of years, I guess now ago, that was one of the most exciting things for me, right? Because when you think about luxury products, you think about things that are expensive AF. There's a lot of theft that goes on, and especially since COVID. And so to have a mechanism in place, even if people are always going to sell shit on like the black market, right? But having something that can't go into these normal resale channels like a Real or Poshmark or Vestiaire, whatever, if there was a mechanism where they could say, oh shit, this was stolen or lost, then they can't sell it again. Because one of the craziest challenges right now, I'm sorry I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, is that companies can't authenticate products. So even a primary reseller, or a primary seller rather, of luxury goods, there's a company that I won't name just for privacy purposes, but 23% of their returns are counterfeit. So imagine they sell, they're a primary seller, it's not resale, so they authenticate the goods because they come straight from the brand, but then they sell them, and then 23% annually of those returns are fakes. And they don't have enough money, they don't have enough manpower to authenticate because they're getting so good. So having a technology like this, even if it's obviously an additional expense, which is a little bit of a threshold, right? On the long run, right, saves a lot of money and a lot of time. So that's just one of the most exciting things about these technologies and their implementations. And of course, it's reliable tech because it's been around for a while. But again, the execution is where it really needs to be nailed.
Also, just a real quick comment: the cost of the counterfeiting actually gets pushed to consumers, right? Because now, like, they have to pay insurance, and that's just going to be extra cost to the customer. Places like the Real, they're verifying products by hand sometimes, and that's how they justify like a 40% seller fee, So the cost trickles down. To Cameron's question on standards, I think the short answer from our side is we're trying to be flexible, where it's definitely still early days, and we want to leave ourselves the flexibility to evolve as more and more ideas come to light. And so we have a contract we use. We're obviously following PBT. Sounds like Mark has his own contract. And so it's going to be exciting to see different behaviors get kind of ossified, and that can eventually maybe be pulled out into like the standard. But it still feels a little early, and we're leaving ourselves the flexibility where IYK will be like standard agnostic. You'll be able to choose whatever standard you want, and it'll still work.
I think it's important to note there's still this tremendous convergence of thought that's happening right now. When we designed our chips, we designed them back in early 2021, and they are compatible with this standard that just came out. So, like, we're thinking on the same page here, and there is a lot more agreement, I think, than disagreement on this. And I think it's also important to note that a link between an NFC tag and an NFT on a smart contract does not constitute proof of authenticity, that there still needs to be another standard on top of that, which looks like a registry, where you can say, this is Nike Holdings, and this is their tax identification number, and these are the contracts that they are linking products to. Because right now I could make a NFC tag that cryptographically links to a contract, but I can put it on my counterfeit Nikes, and when you scan it, it's going to say that it's authentic. No, that's not the way to do it. You still need a human element. You still need a DAO of sorts to verify that this creator is making things under this contract and this is a valid product. So it's still a very interesting human element to this. And I think that you are working on this, right?
Perfect segue.
Right. I mean, this is actually gets to my last sort of question around this. And yeah, we're working on this open registry, calling it the Ethereum Reality Service. I think Mark, you've explored doing this registry stuff as well. Chris has looked in doing registry stuff as well. I think it's really important to your point, have these attestations from these brands that indeed they were the creator of this. And you will have cross attestations between the chip and the brand and the brand and the chip. And you can do really incredible things that start to look like, IRL roll-ups in a sense of like things that you've signed and attested to. But this brings up a broader question. And I should note, as one of the co-authors of the spec, I'm not offended that you, you have some
hot takes.
Hot takes. I personally believe that possession is 9/10 of the law. I think that the rational take for brands is having this sort of marker. I would prefer an abstraction layer above the PBT to handle that, but I think that's, like put in a PR request. I think, that kind of stuff is pretty cool. But in our last minute here, I want to explore this question more around decentralization versus centralization, and how you approach it, where centralization is frequently lower cost, easier to implement, and sometimes easier for the user, versus decentralization. What are the benefits with physicals?
Well, one of the things that I just want to note from a brand perspective is they want to own everything. Right, and so there's obviously the purest decentralized, probably much more secure, and there are a lot of benefits for consumers more so, but the brand always wants to maintain that information and control. And so I think that at least for them on the larger conglomerate level, will want to have a sense of a centralization, a repository of those kind of assets, right? So that they have more security or at least perceived security. So I just wanted to add that to your question.
Yeah, for us, we're really building with decentralization in mind, but some things aren't as practical today. So that video example I gave earlier, that's a Web 2 implementation, right? But there are certain elements that it's really important for it to be decentralized, like Mark was talking about and Cameron with the registry, right? We should have to attest that we put this chip in this product, and you should be able to verify that signature, right? So there are core pieces that we think have to be decentralized today, but kind of the ancillary app experience, that will take time, I think.
Awesome. Well, I'll let Mark have the final word if there's someone to add on here, and I think we're out of time. I'll let you have the final word on decentralization. But
I don't have any final words. Thanks for coming. Check us out, smartseal.io.
Awesome.
I'm at visical.io.
And iyk.app.
And arx.org, arx.org. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.